June 2013, Gary, writing about Rust in his blog, mentioned the idea of adding a giant to the game, which players would have to band together to protect themselves against. The mechanics of this giant may have been to target large bases, with the basic idea Gary mentioned including the giant being as large as 100 feet tall. This concept was more or less replaced by the attack helicopter, which could be aggressive, attacking players and bases, often requiring players to band together to take down. Another strange part of the early game design mentioned by Gary was the accidental inclusion of a monolith. It was described as a white cube left miles from any landmark. Players were adventurous, exploring the mountains if only to enjoy the view, and out of curiosity explored the area beyond the mountain. It's not recorded where exactly the monolith was, but a few players on a French server found it and started building around it. No doubt their curiosity had them running tests on the object, surely hitting it with rocks and pickaxes. It must have been removed from the game, and as far as I know, there have been no screenshots or videos of its existence. Rust Legacy was certainly an unusual place, where cheaters could kill you through walls, phase into your base, jump vast distances, speed across the map, and the sky at night could sometimes look very strange. Whether this aurora was a glitch or an intended part of the game, it was impressive to see, sometimes stretching across the entire night sky, and a similar aurora borealis, although rare, can still be seen in later versions of the game. Stormy weather was added, and it turned out that storms could be predictable, with players sometimes performing rain dances just before the rain would start falling. Radiation has also been a long-standing feature of the game, although in the early days I remember very quickly getting a fatal level of exposure while exploring the map. I'm sure this was changed to give the player more warning before it was too late, but those early days felt tense as you ran around trying to remember which spots had this invisible danger. One of the creepiest aspects of the game for me was hearing other players on my roof. This often happened in those busy hours where you might place down a wooden base at the start of a wipe, at a point where you might not have weaponry to fight other players off. To avoid attracting unwanted attention, you might be better off pretending to be away from keyboard, so that the unwanted visitor doesn't resort to door camping. So you might wait to hear them leave, listening out for the sound of their footsteps to eventually become distant. The threat of encountering players at any moment hiding around any corner can be spooky. Even if you only venture out during the day, they might still be near you without you even knowing it. Aggressive animals can be a significant danger against badly armed players. What's especially dangerous is the animals can see you in the dark and chase you over long distances. Zombie NPCs have sometimes been in the game, so you never know what to expect. There's been different variants of zombies, and they have different behaviours. Some have been so strong that it could be better just to run away from them. Even the scientists can be a challenge for inexperienced players, giving people running along a road a good scare when they suddenly get attacked from the roadside. I once encountered a church, run by a group of players in a village that made their own religion. The building was highly advanced, with automated doors, a system that pumped water, sentry guns, and various other features. The village Discord group referred to the building as a temple, with one particular member acting as head of the church. At some point there was a red blob that might appear in players' bases, and it seemed mysterious until it was explained to be caused by a construction plan. Having the construction plan equipped overlays a blue or red building foundation, and it was the corner of this foundation that could stick through walls. It seems strange to me that someone would want to build in a cave, as there's a long way to go getting in and out of the base, having to navigate the dark tunnels that are often steep and contain jumping puzzles. I once raided at a cave base, and found that it was just a door, with a few boxes scattered around beyond it further inside. There were no rooms and no sleeping players. You'd think that you might see these players at the cave entrance, or bump into them as you explore the caves, but they've always felt empty despite having clearly been used. What I find spooky about these cave people is that to this day I've never bumped into one. They obviously exist, but my imagination is left to fill in that unknown gap about how these cave builders appear and how they behave. I imagine them to be poorly equipped, wearing ragged clothing, and being highly protective of their caves. That eerie feeling of going through an abandoned place is common as a server loses its population. Decaying bases become more common as the days pass, and the treasures kept in them lose their value. What once might have been a heavily defended fortress yesterday can suddenly be discovered in ruins. The players that would once have tried to kill you in seconds are now in a permanent state of sleep. If every base on the server seems abandoned, the experience turns from tension to loneliness. Any weaponry you had now feels worthless, as you know they've moved on to a more populated server. Even on a build server this can feel spooky, and in one particular case, I came across a building that had inexplicably been filled with teddy bears. Occasionally, new players might have seen something unexplained in the sky. One of the updates in particular that may have led to confusion was the delivery drone. It can easily be mistaken for a distant minicopter, which can capture players' attention as a potential threat, or leave them wondering what it was. Sometimes it's not a well-armed player flying across the map, but just a drone that visits player-made shops. Many people have a strong fear of deep water, and while Rust might not trigger that fear, I still find myself feeling very wary of how deep the water is when I take a boat out. In the game you can find deep enough water that you can't see what's below you, and for me, that's what would trigger my fear in real life. The game is immersive enough that I almost feel uncomfortable when using a boat. The inclusion of deep water in the gameplay might not have been a deliberate attempt to make the game feel spooky, unlike the Halloween updates, but for me, even if it was just a single-player sandbox game, sailing above deep water is still the spookiest thing I've experienced in Rust over the years.